Hey, welcome back. So the world of computing moves in cycles, and if we look back at the 1950s, we started with a very monolithic architecture where everything ran on mainframes. But then as that scaled out over time and desktop computing took hold, then we started to move towards this sort of client-server type architecture. And then time has progressed, we've moved into the internet era, and of course cloud computing has taken hold, and architecture has changed to go with that. We've started to move into microservice architecture. A lot of people, in fact most people, run that as their architectural pattern today. But now as we start to move into the metaverse type era, then things like content delivery networks, edge compute is really what's taking hold, and microservices are just scaling out like crazy. And actually, as our compute evolves, we need our data to scale out with it. If we want to be able to serve up our compute, our content, our applications in a highly distributed, scalable fashion with low latency to serve those metaverse type scenarios, then not only do we need the computer architecture to come along with that, but we need the data architecture to do that. Now, as we've moved into the cloud computing era and we need that scale, you've seen relational databases evolve, and we've also seen new database technologies come in. So we've seen things like Redis, which is really a sort of in-memory caching type database that's used for key value. That's become very popular for highly scalable systems. We've seen things like Mongo and Cassandra, which are really popular for microservice type scenarios and having that distributed scale. But they are still very high-end, heavy type servers that are really designed for a back-end compute environment. And they're not really designed for the edge or to run in things like on browser or on device. And actually, there's one technology that has been the dominant factor for running on mobile devices, for running on browsers, or running on edge networks, and that's SQLite. And SQLite is an amazing technology. It is designed to have a database that operates as a single file. It's fast, it's performant. But actually, as cool as SQLite is, it is an old technology and it's designed to solve a different problem. And that problem is to run a very small database that can run on low-powered devices such as mobile phones. And then you can have that ability to use relational database technologies. However, it is not designed for the cloud-native edge browser type technology scenarios. It has adapted over time to be able to use for that, but it wasn't designed for that in the first place. And if you've ever worked with SQLite, you can see the problems almost instantly that it has, which is it doesn't easily support things like data synchronization. So if I want to have a very small database that's running on my machine or in my browser or on Edge, and I want that to sync back with data in a back end there, then that becomes really difficult and challenging with SQLite because it's not designed for those data synchronization challenges. It's not designed for that real-time scalability. You can do it with it, but it's not designed for that. It's also not designed for a lot of the problems that we have today. So doing things like transactions, doing things like the ability to run a graph database. That's not really the scenarios SQLite's designed for. It's designed for these very small, low-powered cost devices. So we need a new technology that is going to be able to solve that problem for edge compute and for cloud native and serverless compute and browser compute in one go. And actually, I think there is a technology that is in the brewing which could solve that problem. I'm not saying it is going to solve that problem, but I think it's pretty darn close and it's interesting. And its name is SurrealDB. And really, SurrealDB is designed from the ground up to run on browser, to run on Edge. It's lightweight, it supports data synchronization, it can run in clusters, it can scale out to a huge amount of clusters and data sources, etc., and run on terabytes worth of data. And actually, it's a super interesting technology, and it even does things like graph databases. And anyway, with that in mind, let's get started. All right, first things first, if you want to get started with it, you can just go to surrealdb.com, and you can see it's a kind of funky site, and it's pretty good. It's got some great documentation, good getting starting guide, so you can kind of just walk through that. But if you click on the install button, you can see it easily kind of walks you through how to get started with that. So we'll do that. Let's bring up terminal for a second. And what we're going to do is install SurrealDB on our machine. So I'm running a Mac M1, so the install instructions will be slightly different depending on what machine you are. So in this case, I'm going to use brew. So we'll just do that. And there you go. As you can see, brew is installed. On my machine, it was obviously installed in advance. Be aware, I'm running beta 7. By the time you watch this video, or if you watch it in a few months' time, it might be a different version, but I'm sure the install is going to be the same. Now, if you want to check that it's up and running okay, you can just type in surreal version, and then you can see it will tell you what version you're running at the moment. Everything runs via CLI, and if you want to interact with it, you just type in surreal. And if you type in surreal help, it will give you a list of all the commands that you can run. So you can see there is surreal start to start the database server. If you want to backup, it's backup, import, version, and then if you want to start interacting with the command line, run some SQL commands, you can just type that in. So we'll do that in a few minutes, but for just now, we actually need to get our Surreal database up and running. And I'm going to type in surreal start. So if I type in surreal start, you can see it's got a very funky kind of SurrealDB up and running. And then as you can see, it opens up an in-memory key value database to begin with. And actually, that's probably one of the first things I would say is SurrealDB is really good at key value stuff. And we're going to show that in a second. It is really super fast for that type of scenario. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to start up the database again. But this time what I'm going to do is take a little bit of control of my logging levels, and I'm going to set my username and password. And then I can also specify whether I want it to be a file or whether I want it to be an in-memory database manually. And I'm just going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to do --log to say I want it to be running at info level. So the reason that I'm going to run it at info level is I don't want my log to be firing up with absolutely every command that I run. I'm going to set the user to being root, and I'm going to set my password to be root. And then I want that to be a memory database at the moment. So I'll just type in memory, and therefore it's going to be in memory. What that means is if I put something into the database and then I stop the database and start it back up again, I'm going to lose whatever I put in there. Whereas if it's obviously a file-based one, then that's going to be fine because it's going to be written to disk. So let's run that. And as you can see, my database is now up and running. Okay, so now that the database is started up, what we want to do is connect into that via the CLI and use that surreal SQL command that I talked about earlier. And that will allow us to write some SQL commands, get some responses back, and interact with the database. So to do that, I'm just going to type in surreal SQL, and then I want to specify a connection, because if I don't specify a connection, then what's going to happen is it's going to go to Surreal's cloud servers by default. So it runs on a localhost 8000. So all I need to do is type --con and then put HTTP localhost 8000, and that will connect to that. Now, I don't need to put in a username and password. By default, the CLI will default to root as the username and password. But of course, when you start up the server, you can set that password to whatever you want. Again, you can use certificates and things like that as well. So it's kind of up to you. So I'm just going to do --user --pass, and I'm going to set the password to root. And then if I do that, you can see it gives me that nice little prompt. So if I want to check how it works, I can just type in something like info for DB. Everything's semicolon terminated. So if I do that, you can see it comes back with an error. So it's very quick actually, but it says specify a namespace to use. And that's one of the key things that you need to do is when you connect via the CLI, you need to say, I want you to run under this namespace. Which, would typically be something like an organization name. It works in the same way as something like Docker. You have namespaces, and then you have an underlying database or repository underneath that as well. So you will need to specify a namespace, and then you'll need to specify the database that you want to work with. So let's just exit out of that. And then what we will do is we'll set the namespace to Chris Hay UK. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the DB to company's house. So that'll be my database name. And then I can type in info for DB again. And as you can see, we've got a result coming back, and it was fairly quick. So the good news, anyone who's ever used a relational database before or any SQL syntax, this is going to feel very familiar quite quickly. So if I want to select some data from a table, I can just do something like select star from company, and then it's going to then come back. And so in this case, there's no results because there's nothing in my database. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some companies. To do that, I just type in the create statement. And how it works with SurrealDB is I need to specify when I'm creating a row, I need to specify the identifier for the row, and then I need to specify the table name. So in this case, I'm going to have a company table, and I'm going to create row 100. And as you can see, it supports a schemaless format, so I can just create these on the fly. Now, it does support a schemaed format where you can specify the column types, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to go through that today because I think the schemaless one is really great for getting started, but let's kind of show that. So I can go create company, and then I'm going to just put in maybe company 100. So I'm going to create a new table called company, and I'm going to create row 100. And then what I'm going to do there is I'm just going to set the name to being Chris Company. And then maybe what I will do is set initial shares to being 100. So if we do that, you can see my company's created. And if I type select star from company, then it's going to come back with Chris Company. I can create another company if I want. So let's create that with company ID 150. And then I'm going to maybe set that to Fred Company. And then we'll set the initial shares to being 200. And then if we run that, you can see that's created. And then I can go select star from company. And you can see both rows are going to be returned. I get Chris Company and I get Fred Company. Now, if I try and create another row of data there with the same ID, maybe I change this to 100, whatever, I'm going to get an error because, it's the unique ID is 150 there. So you can see company 150 already exists. So if I want to do an update on that, I can do update company 150. And I can say set initial shares equals 150, and then run that. And then if I do a select star from company, you can see the Fred Company has now got 150 shares. So you can do a create, you can do an update, you can do a select. And if I want to get rid of the Fred Company, I can go delete from company. And I can set that equal to 150. And then you can see status OK. Let's do a select star from company. And you can see Fred Company is gone and I'm back with Chris Company. Now, if I just run the create company, Fred Company, 100 shares, do a select star from company, and we'll be back to results there. And I can, rather than doing a star, if I just want to have one bit of data, maybe I just want to see the name, I can go select name from companies. So if we run that, so in that case it's company, not companies. So you can see why it returned no results. So let's change that to select star, select name from company, run that. You can see it comes back with just the name. So I can specify which columns I want. And of course I can do where clauses as well. So I can say select star from company where name equals Chris Company. And then you can see it's just come back with Chris Company. And I can do other things as well. So maybe I want to say where initial shares is less than 200. And then you will see that it comes back with both of them because I have set Fred Company to have initial shares to 100. So let's update that. So we'll set Fred Company's shares to 150. That's updated. We do a select star again, and then you can see Fred Company's got its 150 shares. But now if I run the select star from company where initial shares is less than, let's make it less than 140. You can see it's only going to come back with Chris Company. And then if I put that to being a greater than, you can see it comes back with Fred Company. So I can use the where clauses to then run whatever I need on my queries. And then I think finally, what I want to be able to show you there is if I want to get an exact row, and this is where it becomes super fast. You can see at the moment it's taking something like 115 microseconds, 85 microseconds to come back. So these are super fast queries as it stands. So again, this is one of the benefits of SurrealDB SurrealDB, it is a super fast database, right? It is running at microsecond speed, especially if you're doing key value scenarios or if you've got very small databases. It is just lightning fast. But let's see it run even faster. So what I'm going to do is I want to just pull back a specific row. So I really just want to pull back the Fred company. So this time, rather than going where name is equal to Fred company or Chris company, what I want to be able to do is just pass in its ID. So it's just to remember, when I set that to where name equals Chris company, select star, it took 104 microseconds. Let's do this where I pass the ID. So I'll do a select star from company. But this time I'm gonna put in the ID. So in this case, the ID of Chris company was 100, and then we'll run that, and you can see it's ran that in 74 microseconds. So it's running a lot faster. So the next thing you probably notice about SurrealDB, which I think is really interesting, is that it automatically kind of supports this sort of JSON type format as well. So what we're going to do now is actually expand that out so we have a kind of a sort of deeper structure. So what we'll do is we'll create a new company, and this time what we will do is set the office address, for example. So we'll have a company 200, and we'll originally call this new company. We'll give that maybe 500 shares to begin with. So what we'll do is we'll have a new field called registered office, and then what we'll do is we'll set address 1 to be the first line of the address. So we'll maybe set that to 25 or 23 New Street. And then what we also want to do is maybe set the city. So we'll call it, say, registered office .city, and we'll call this Newville. And then what we can then do is set the postcode to equal NE1 V1L, Newville. So if we do that, and I just need to put a comma in here because I've obviously forgotten to do that. And then if we run this, it will create our company. But now if I do a select star from a company, what you are going to see that it's automatically given us this nice little JSON type structure here. So you see registered office, and then underneath that address 1, city, etc. And then I can run queries like select registered office dot address 1 from company, and we created company 200, I think it was the new one that we created. And there you go. You can see it's just returned registered office address 1, 23 New Street. So I think that support for JSON type structures and the ability for us to nest, etc., is a really sweet kind of format, and again something that goes beyond what you can kind of do with SQLite today. So it's sort of this native support for JSON. Now, that's not the only thing that you can do there. You can obviously, it's got actually support for functions, etc. So if I wanted to, I could create a function and then do a computed column. So if I wanted to write a JavaScript function and compute a column, I would be able to do that as well. I'm not going to do that just now because this is sort of an initial guide, but just be aware that you can do that. It's got a bunch of built-in functions, things like math and crypto. So other things I can do is I can even put in arrays there if I want. So I could do something like update company. Let's update company 200, the one we just messed with, and then we'll maybe set shareholders equals to Fred, Bob, and Jemima, and we'll have Zoe as well. So we've got 4 shareholders there. We'll just run that, and as you can see, I forgot to put the equal sign, so we'll just add that back in and then run that. And now if I do a select star from company to 100. I mean, it's already came back there. You can see that on the screen, but you can see that I've got shareholders and I've got this list: Fred, Bob, Jemima, and Zoe. So I've got a lot of control in the structure of how I store my data, and I've got a lot of control on how I can query that data and bring that back. Now, probably the next thing that makes that super important is then if I want to, I can actually do joins in a different way as well. So for example, at the moment, you've got shareholders, Fred, Bob, Jemima, and Zoe. So what we're gonna do now is we'll maybe create ourselves a new table called person. And then we will maybe add a person called Zoe. And then what we'll do is set the first name equal to Zoe. And then we will set the last name equal to Smith. So if we just run that, we've got a new person. And then one of our other shareholders was Jemima. So let's put Jemima in as well. We'll give the key as Jemima. And then Jemima's surname can be Stevens. So we'll run that. We've got 2 people in there. We can do a select star from person. And you can see we've got both Zoe and Jemima. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to relate the people from my person table to the shareholders on my company. So to do that, what I can do is do a update company, and that was 200, and I'm going to set shareholders equal to and this time I'm going to set it to my 2 persons. So in this case, it would be person and Zoe, and it will be person and Jemima. So notice how that works there for a second, right? So I'm doing a regular update as I did before. I'm updating the company table with ID 200, which was the new company, if you remember. And then I'm setting my shareholders to an array, and then I'm just referencing the record from the person table. So person Zoe, person Jemima. Now, as you can see, all that's actually really done is store that as a string. But where the real power comes is when I want to start doing joined queries there. So what I would be able to do, so now what I could do, if I wanted to be able to sort of join up data from the company table, where I've got shareholders Zoe, and I want to pull maybe Zoe's last name, which is Smith, then I could join this together by a pretty cool query. So what I could do is say select shareholders. So in this case, I want to pull my shareholders column. And then what I'm going to do is say, give me everything back. And then what I want is the last name. So in this case, it should be Smith. And then if I do a from, and remember it's from the company table and it was record 200. So if I run that, you can see it comes back with shareholders, last name, Smith Stevens. And it's running at super fast time. It's right 161 microseconds. So what you can see there is you can start to run some pretty powerful queries, and I can combine this. So if I want to see, for example, the name of the company as well, then I can just name comma, run that query again, and now I've got new company and then the shareholders down it. So I can really start to drill down, and I can nest it as far as I like. So it's really powerful kind of joining syntax, and it runs really quickly. But as you can see there, the real power in this database is the ability to essentially have that really great way of record linking. It's really lightweight way. It supports native JSON formats. It's super fast. I mean, this is microsecond stuff. As I said, it runs on things like WebAssembly as well, so I can run it on browser as well as backend servers. So it's really sort of great here. Now, okay, so I think I've given you a pretty good idea of how SurrealDB works. It is a super fast engine. It's really designed for the edge, cloud, and serverless modern era. It really takes capabilities, things like JSON, and how you can do sort of deep nesting within that. that. It's got a really great way of joining data together. It's super fast for key value storage types scenarios. And of course, we focus on in-memory databases today. But also, as I said before, it's got that ability to run in clusters and synchronize data to backends. It is also got great ability to scale to a huge size and maintain that performance as well. And I'm going to show you that probably in the next video. So we're going to stop it here. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Company House database, which is where Companies House is a UK sort of government agency, which has a list of all of the companies in the UK. It's a pretty big database. It's got about 5 million rows. And what we're going to do is put SurrealDB up against the pace against SQLite in that video. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to show you a couple of the performance issues. It's going to show you how it runs against SQLite and how it can be blindingly fast, and then we'll explore some of the other concepts a little bit later. And that's going to be a fun video to do. By the way, you know, spoiler alert, it runs blazingly fast, and it's going to be a lot of fun doing that. So hopefully you've got a good idea of how SurrealDB works now. Also, by the way, in that future video, I'm going to show you how you can get started with things like the Node.js client, so you can actually write some code against that. It's got some really good client libraries, and it's pretty easy to get code working on that. Anyway, so hopefully I'll catch you on that next video, and we'll catch you soon. Cheers.